So hi guys, it's been a minute. It's Nafisa here. Tell me if you can relate to this. I applied to architecture school without having any real clue of what architecture really means. I only started researching about architecture courses after getting accepted into architecture school in UiTM Shalam. I've never experienced taking technical drawing classes or any art classes before in high school. I have no close relative to ask about architecture and what should I prepare before entering into these courses. And this is my first time living in a dorm for the first 18 years of my life. After listening to all of that, I believe you can imagine the amount of culture shock that I faced during my first semesters in architecture. It actually took me a few months to finally take a grasp of the amount of work that I actually have to produce each week. But surprisingly, during my first year, both semesters, semester 1 and semester 2, my GPAs were the highest amongst my studio mates. So today I want to share 10 tips that I've learned throughout architecture school that have helped me to maintain a first class GPAs throughout my semesters. So the purpose of this video is to give a clarity that you don't necessarily have to have all of the right skill before entering architecture school. I think people misunderstood that the purpose of going to school, the purpose of continuing study is to actually increase your knowledge. There's no point getting into universities when you already have all of the knowledge and didn't make any mistake throughout the 4 years. So don't be too harsh. And if you are interested in architecture school but you think you are still lacking in a few areas and skill that you thought you need to have so that you can perform well in architecture school. So stay tuned until the end of the video because I think the last tips is the most important one among all of the tips that I'm going to share today. The first tip that I would suggest is to not buy all of the stuff that you think you need at the beginning of the semesters. I would really suggest for you to buy it incrementally by batch when the times come that you need that stuff for your projects. You will usually get a long list of things that is typically used in architecture school. For example, T-square, scale ruler and all of that. But you might find out later on that you don't really need those things in your workflow. For example, for technical drawing students who have technical drawing backgrounds, it is very common for them to use the long T-square. But for me, I personally didn't really prefer to use that ruler and usually just use a long steel ruler with varying length. So the 15 cm one, the 30 cm and the longest one 60 centimeters. All of us this is more of a preferences, but I already spent like hundreds of ringgit buying all of the stuff that I thought I need. For another thing that I bought but I don't really use is the stencils for erasing, where you have a small panel and have a hole where you can selectively erase. I don't really need that things, just erase things normally, but I bought all of that at the beginning of the semesters because with the fear that I might not have access to any stationery stores. So of course this tips is applicable if stationery store which sells architectural tools is easily accessible for you if you live in a rural area or didn't have an ease of transportation. So buy all of the essential first. For example, A3 cartridge paper or A3 butter paper. Those are the common things, and some drafting pens such as the Micron or Stabilo brands. This tips is also applicable for architectural books. During my first year, you will be introduced to various architecture books, which is like hundreds of pages long, and all of these are like the old school books that have been used by our lecturers and our seniors beforehand. So these books can get very costly if you want to buy them in batch. Like for example, the From Space and Order by DKG. So DKG have various different books covering presentations, covering technical drawing and all that. And one of the things I've noticed in my final year, I might not actually really refer to architecture books. Most of the time I will just simply Google it, and the books stay hidden inside my dorm room or my study rooms, and I only refer to it when I actually really need a good reference, for example for presentation and so on, but not all the time. So if you wanted to save some money, because those books can get quite costly, like hundreds for per books, first you can find a summary and a PDF version online, or you can actually buy it with your friends, so kongsi to it, and then buy it and share it within the people. It's not architecture school. It's not really like medicine school or business school where you have specific books that you have to bring on each classes. No, those architecture books that have been promoted by the lecturers is for supplementary information if you need some more additional reference, because at the end of the day our lecturer also refers to those books. But if you wanted to save some money or didn't have the budget to buy those architecture books, you don't necessarily have to buy it because you might eventually not even use it. And another thing, you might actually can find it in libraries. So if I'm not mistaken, right now UiTM is trying to compile a digital library, so you might find it in the digital library in the form of digital format. My second tips will be get a toolbox, and I'm not talking about the general size, get a big toolbox. So the reason is, as I said in my previous video, your first until fourth semesters you will still be doing manual works. So that will means that you will have a lot of stationery to produce your drawings, from 10 different types of pencils, 10 different types of pens, 10 different rulers, and different type of glues and masking tapes. So it will be a good idea, as it helps to give you a sense of mobility, where if you need to travel around or move from your dorm into your studios, it is easier to have it carried in one large box rather than having multiple pencil cases. And another thing, it will also ensure that there will be a low chances for you to lose your stuff. When you are living in a studio environment, your stuff will be your friend's stuff in a matter of minutes, especially crucial things like masking tapes, crafting knife, watercolor brushes, and so on. So get a big toolbox and label all of your stuff with your name, as it can prevent you from buying these same stationery tools over and over again throughout the semesters, which can get very costly, unless if you really want to donate all of your stuff to your friends, then all props to you. My next tips will be, please learn to take good pictures, and this is essential to bring justice to your projects. Imagine spend hours and hours producing presentation boards, but end up submitting your presentation board with the shadow of your hand in front of it. That would be very aesthetically pleasing, right? It doesn't really bring a sense of justice to the amount of work that you place inside your on your projects. And make sure that the image that you presented really represent the amount of work that you have placed on it. So I think it is obvious for now that we are very unsure whether we can get back into our normal studio life or just continuing on with online learning. So right now I'm still waiting confirmation from UiTM whether I need to pack up my stuff or just stay at home. So one of the common problems that I noticed from my friend during our online years, when we still have to do our manual works during our first semesters, that not many of us know how to really take good pictures of your project while submitting it. At the end of every semester, we will have review day, where there will be external and internal panel who will review your works and your marks that have been given by the studio leaders to finalize your final marks for that semesters. And usually usually sometimes presentation can make or break the marks of your presentation boards. Even though your design might not be that good, but your presentation is just like on point, you might have a high chance for your marks to get increased. And by the way, friendly reminder, please do not throw away all your design progress, mock-up and sketches until you are confirmed to have an abundant amount of photos of it, because at the end of the day, those are the proof of your design development from the beginning to end. So because on the first year, we didn't really touch on architecture elements such as the structure, the space planning and all of that. So the first year is a lot more artistic than you think, and the only thing that the lecturers can confirm that is your project that you have authentically developed is through your progress development. So even though you think that sketches is not as good as your friends or anything like that, keep it, and until you have confirmed you have a record of all your progress through scans and photography, then you can throw it away. But usually my seniors during internship says that it's good to keep it, because that is the proof of your progress from the first year until the final year, and you can see how much you have improved if you get all of those stuffs. One quick tips that I would like to give is to send your presentation board to be scanned professionally at the printer shop. So you can do this absolutely by using your camera or phones, but it is a very difficult to get photos with even lighting if you are capturing it inside your room, and where you have a high quality pictures where the lecturer who will assess your works can zoom in and read exactly what you are writing on each presentation boards. So if you try to finish your presentation board early, where you can send it into a printer shop and be scanned properly. You can see all of the examples of mockup that I have captured properly, and this is for safekeeping if I ever need to update my portfolio in the future for future use. The next step would be to find the medium that you love and invest a lot of time in it. Okay. In essence, the design process for each semester will be divided into 3 parts. First, you understand what the brief want and what is the expectation for that you need to produce for each semester, and then there will be the design phases, which took the longest time, and also the final part will be the presentation. This is where you conclude all of the things that you have studied and produced and developed and your progress throughout all of the semesters into a few compact boards that we call presentation boards. So your presentation board will make or break your design. Sometimes your design can be very beautiful, but if not represented properly, it can give a lower impact to the viewers and the person who assess your work. So these tips is applicable if you are someone who enter architecture but think that you are not very good at presentation and sketching. So for presentations, you can use various different mediums such as markers, watercolor, pastels, pencil colors, and all of these materials can actually produce good result if you know how to use it. So if you are someone who are not professional in, who are not very eloquent in arts, or have no real idea how to produce good drawings, I would suggest for you to focus on one different kind of medium. So you don't have to jump between medium because you think, oh, sometimes watercolor looks better, sometimes pastel looks better, sometimes you prefer markers and so on. And by focusing on one medium, it will reduce your time jumping around in between medium, trying to decide which one is the good one for you, and also reduce the cost that you have to spend buying all of this medium, because different mediums will require different kind of treatment. So for example, if you use poster color, you will have to invest in a setting spray, which can get very costly, around 50 ringgit for each can. Those are expensive and those can really add up over time. I do agree that it's good to experiment with different kind of medium. For example, I personally use watercolor for the overall image and detail it up using markers or pencil colors, but those knowledge on which kind of medium to combine and where to use each medium, you will learn it after you have mastered or become eloquent with one element, and then you will get a sense of how to make it more beautiful and presentable. So think far ahead in the future. You have 4 semesters that you have to spend producing many A1 paper of presentation boards, so it is worth the investment to focus on one different kind of medium that you can develop more in the future. So the next step will be to surround your life relating to architectural topics and things. This is especially useful if you are interested to improve your visualization skill. You can start with searching around through Instagram or YouTube. I believe there are hundreds of Instagram pages who are focusing on architectural visualization, where they collect students' architecture works from all around the world, from international to local universities. So I think one misconception is when looking around for reference for architectural visualization and diagram, do not limit yourself with only architectural contents, because design and architecture is one of the family branch of design. The design world itself is very huge and large. There are concept design, graphic arts design, product design, fashion design, interior design, and if you delve into all of this world, you can see that there are a few elements and principles that has been repeated all over again. So what are the advantages that you get if you do this early on? First, it will save you a lot of time finding for references when it is time for you to produce a presentation board. So time are very limited and you will waste a lot of time if you start to find references during the production week. All of those hard work should be done beforehand. So during the presentation weeks, you can only choose which style and which style of presentation that you want to replicate for your presentation boards, and will be able to expand your visual libraries and have some sense of what makes a good presentation board and what makes a good presentation diagram. So I will list down a few of the channels that I have been referencing on from my first year until now for you to look around. So my next advice would be to not limit your tutors and student leaders just in design classes. So build a good relationship with them just as much as you need to build a good relationship with your studio mate. The reason for this is because every student, including you, have their own design preferences and style that is embedded for them. So everyone has their own design direction from the beginning that will define you as a designer. And a very good tutors usually have some sense and can detect what kind of students you are from early on. And the benefits of this is they can point out what are the weaknesses that you might not even realize during your design processes, and you can skip all of the hassles of making the mistakes by noticing your weaknesses early on. And those weaknesses might be you're not good at presentation, or you're not very good at developing your ideas, or you are someone who are over detailed or too perfectionist that your design projects are not done on time. Those are the weaknesses and strength that your lecturers can detect on and tell you early on, so you know which skill that you can enhance and which skill that you can make an effort to improve. For example, my personal story, I've only met my that specific tutors for around 2 times, and this third time that she met me because I handed my drawings a bit late is because she make a remarks where you overthink everything that you are doing before submitting, and maybe that might be the cause for me handing my works later than the rest of my studio mates. And honestly, for the previous 18 years of my life, no one ever told me that I am an overthinker, and so that are some qualities that I have been trying to work on from my first years until now. And by identifying what your weaknesses is, it can easily help you to figure out why you are stuck at one point in your design process. It might be because of some of the weaknesses that you might have not noticed if your lecturers has never put it out. The next reason would be the lecturers that you have met on your lower year. There is a high chance that you will meet them again during your upper semesters. So I think it is a good investment to make a good impression on them in case you will get the same tutors over the semesters. And another thing that you should know is the lecturer that you have various different background and have various different study experience. So a lot of our lecturers at UiTM are overseas graduate for their masters or their degrees. So if you are interested in getting a scholarship or making a good portfolio to apply for overseas in masters, it will be by having a good relationship with your lecturers. It wouldn't be such a drag or such a hassle to ask them advice for things other than architecture project for your design classes. So some tips that I can give, it can be very generic, but it's very important because it can make a good impression between you and your lecturers. And I would like to highlight that for your projects, your lecturers is not your enemy who are trying to nitpick every problems in your design. Take it as a teamwork. So rather than you versus the lecturers, it is we as a group are trying to make sure that your design works and pass all of the requirements in the brief. So some tips that you can do to make a good impression would be, first is to try and come early for your design classes. Second is to ask smart questions about the brief. Smart question that will show that you actually pay attention to the class and actually trying to further your understanding on what the studio leaders expected of your studios. And the third one is very important, is to not skip your tutorial session. So I think I personally have felt this many times before, where you think that the work that you have produced that week are not very worthwhile to present for your tutorial session, but please do not run away from your tutorials, because by skipping your tutorial session you will miss a lot of valuable information. Even if you didn't have a good materials that you present for that day, you can still learn from 7 or 6 of your group mates who are presenting that day. So by not missing out on that, you can know which part you are still lacking on, and you can still catch up for the next tutorial session. So do not skip your tutorial session to build a good relationship with your tutors. Next tips will be relating to productivity and lifestyle. My ultimate advice for my juniors before this or the other session started is always find the system that works for you. So when do you actually prefer to work? Are you a morning owl? Are you a morning person or a night owl? Some students ultimately prefer to work in the morning, or some people actually prefer to work at night. And there is personally nothing wrong with that, because that is just natural for every individual to have their own system. So the problem arises if you are trying to copy other students' lifestyle, how they work, because that might not be productive for you, because at that specific time is not the time where you usually have the best ideas. So for your first year, I would say your daily habit is, your good result is actually a reflection of your daily habits. By having a set of system that you set weekly on each task, it will save you a lot of time that you spend on mundane weekly tasks such as cleaning up your home, preparing food to eat, or buying stationeries, or doing your laundries. So most of those tasks can be batched together at a certain parts of the day, so the rest of the day you can spend on your projects. And moving on to the next step, for time management, I would suggest to set time scope for things that you dislike, so you can have more time for things that you love to do. So I cannot dismiss the fact that architecture study will take a lot of your time, but once you feel that it can get quite dreadful, try to identify the specific things that you actually dislike from the overall processes. For example, for me personally, I dislike doing technical and CAD drawings because I'm currently doing my digital works in my computers. So the thing that I hate the most is making my plans and technical drawings for section and elevation and so on. So the strategy is to set for 2 to 3 days to finish up all of my CAD drawings, focusing on that. So after I finish the things that I dislike, I can have more times doing things that I like, for example making diagrams and rendering the perspective and so on. By limiting the time that you spend on things that you dislike, you can find the overall process to be much more enjoyable. And during the process of finishing out the tasks that you don't necessarily enjoy, you can look forward to the things that you can enjoy in the future. When you start to say architecture is hard, reframe it by identifying which part that you actually find hard. Do you prefer making drawings or making models more? And try to balance out the activity that you love with the things that you dislike from the overall process. The next tip that I would give is to be aware of burning out. I would say to produce a good design work at the end of the semester is more like a long marathon rather than a very short sprint. I understand that it is a good thing to put a lot of effort, especially on your early years, the first and second years, so you will have kind of an easier time for your third and fourth year because you can focus on other skills that you can improve rather than getting stuck on the basic essential design skills that you get during your first years. But on the other hand of the coin, be aware not to push yourself too hard, thinking that you have to always produce extra from the expectation and design requirement each week. So even though if you are like me, you have that mindset that you need to produce very excellently good things every week, make sure that you make an effort to also have a good quality sleep each night and eat healthy food. Because the fact is, based on my own personal experience, burning out can actually help your design back much longer than just finding a time to rest for one night. Being burnt out can drag your works weeks behind from your friends and peers, and it's actually counterproductive. Resting well is also a productive thing that you can do as an architecture student, so to ensure that you can finish this 14 weeks marathon on time. And the last tip I would say is to involve your parents alongside your design process. I would usually tell them early on when I am having my great or important tutorial session, so there would be an issue where our family wanted to go for vacation and I have an important submission to cater on for the weekend. Like I said, even though we jump straight from SPM straight to degree, architecture is actually a very long 6-year studies, then another additional 2 or 3 years to finally get our license. So it is not a shortcut that you might think initially, and building trust and understanding early on is very essential because you will be using a lot of money, spending a lot of time on your projects, and might not have enough time to interact and socialize with your family members. And family support is very important, especially during this ODL, because you will meet them every day at home, but you might not seem to contribute anything to the household. Another trick that I usually do is to showcase the mock-up that I'm doing at my living room, so they know that the time I spend in my room is actually producing something like this. So I understand that not every parent will understand or might not even care, but just use it as a practice, so when the time matters, they can simply refer on and understand what you are doing each semester. And the last and most important thing that I think the key to my success on my first year is the mindset to give the best in everything that you do, even though you are unsure of it. So like I said from the beginning of the video, if you're still watching until now, thank you. I entered architecture school without a lot of knowledge on the kind of work that I have to produce, but I have the mindset that even though I didn't know 100% what I am doing, I always give the best that I can do and always make an effort to improve based on the comments that the teachers give to me. Overall, those are the key characteristics that differentiates my work and my studio, between me and my studio mates' works, and which lead to an easier semesters for my second and third year in architecture. When doing any assignments, even though it is only an assignment and does not carry a lot of marks for your to be carried on until your final examination, if you think about it, all of the hard works might seem insignificant for the first tutorials that you put a lot of efforts in, but all of the extra effort that you put on your projects will compile on, and you can finally see the benefits and fruits of it at the final submission or final week of that semester. And the time that you slack off or cut back from the effort that you put on your project will also pile on, and you can finally see the distinct differences between the projects that you put a lot of effort in with the projects that you didn't put that much effort. So after 3 years in architecture studies, I would ultimately say skills are much more important than your grades, but the grades that you get are the reflection of the skill that you have. So if you have great presentation skill, communication skill, and maybe drawing for an extra, the grades will eventually come out by itself. If you put a lot of effort and have good and great work ethics every single day that you show up, then those will be reflected in your grades. That's why I said early on, you do not have to necessarily rank after good grade or good CGPAs or whatsoever, but actually focus on showing up every day and doing your best and having a long-term mindset and mentality. So that is all of the tips that I can share today. Also, I plan to keep this video under 5 minutes, but we'll see how it goes during the editing process. Comment down below if you learned anything from this video, or if you have any question that you wanted to ask, or maybe things that I can do to improve these videos that I post overall. So thank you for watching. See you soon.